and welcome to Beauty in the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, and consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. I have a very special guest today. It's Dr. Andres Gantous, and he's a double board certified facial plastic and reconstructive surgeon in private practice in Toronto, Canada. And he's also the associate professor and head of the Division of Facial Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery at the University of Toronto, where he has earned Best Teacher Award year after year. Now, Dr. Gantous also speaks at the medical conferences all over the world, and that's actually where our paths met. I think we were in, a few places. I remember Vegas. But welcome to the podcast. Welcome to our Beauty in the Biz podcast, Dr. Gantous. How are you?
I am well, Catherine. It's very nice to be here with you and seeing you again after, not having any conferences for a while. But it's a pleasure to be here and to see you and to talk to you.
Thanks so much. So, of course, before we get started, I have to ask, are you enjoying the same cosmetic patient surge that we're enjoying here in the States? Are you enjoying that also in Canada?
Absolutely. We also had the same surge in Canada, at least in the larger cities, as far as I know. I think all my colleagues in the field have noticed it, and it's been great. So of the bad things of the pandemic, that's been one of the good things for us, at least, and hopefully for the patients as well.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, I've been through recessions with the plastic surgeons because I've been at this for a long time. And usually plastic surgery was one of the first industries to get hit. And this time it looks like all the money went over to cosmetic rejuvenation rather than travel and restaurants. I assume that's what happened.
I think we can owe it all to this media, which is Zoom.
Right. Thank God. Okay, so I hope it lasts too. So, Dr. Gantous, let's just start at the beginning. How did you end up in facial plastic surgery versus any other specialty?
Good question. Even before I went to medical school, I wanted to be a doctor since I was a little kid. But I come from a family of architects on both sides, on my dad's side and on my mom's side. So I was always very, very in tune with the arts and with design and things like that. And as a matter of fact, when I finished high school, we had to do mandatory vocational testing. And I wanted to go to medical school, and in Latin America, you go to medical school straight from high school. You don't do a pre-med degree. And I already was accepted. So the lady the psychologist who did my testing told me, well, the only reason I'm going to recommend for you to go to medical school is because you score the highest on the examinations. But you really should consider going into graphic design or architecture. So I've always had that artistic side to me. So once I was in medical school, it didn't take very long for me to realize that I wanted to be a surgeon. I really needed to express things with my hands. That's what guided me. And I think that's always the first divide for most medical students or doctors to be, is whether you're going to be a surgeon or a medical person or a pathologist or radiologist or something like that. So for me, surgery was the thing that really guided me. And then as I started doing my internship, and I'm old enough that we had to do rotating internships and so on before you got into specialty training, I realized that I liked plastic surgery. And I thought I was just going to do a general plastic surgery residency. And then I started working. I wanted to train in the States. I grew up in Latin America, and I worked with a head and neck surgeon that had trained at Manhattan Eye and Ear, and he did a lot of facial plastic surgery. And I realized that I sort of liked that a lot. And when I went to train in LA, I decided, well, I'm going to do either plastics or head and neck surgery, whatever I get into first. And as I did my rotations, I decided I like head and neck better than general plastic surgery. I really didn't like a lot of the hand stuff and some of the other stuff that they did. And I liked most of the stuff in head and neck. And that's why I ended up in this specialty, and always with the plan of doing facial plastic and reconstructive surgery. So it's kind of a long process, but I think it has to do just with my innate artistic bend that I've always had, and things that I like, and that's it ended up being the perfect fit for me.
Okay. So did you start your career in academia, or what did you do
Yeah,
next after
I,
you graduated?
yeah, after training in the head and neck otolaryngology head and neck program in Toronto, I did a fellowship in craniofacial surgery with the plastic surgery department here in Toronto as well. And then the question was, you know, whether to go straight into full academia or have a combined community academic practice. And I ended up choosing the latter. So I've always had an academic appointment, but I worked in a partially affiliated teaching hospital that became a full affiliated teaching hospital eventually. But I like to have I wanted to have a little bit more freedom than being a full academic. But with that, obviously, teaching responsibilities were always there. I've had residents and fellows and things like that all along, medical students. Um, but at the same time, I was able to develop a little bit of a private practice on the side. Canada is a little bit different because we have socialized medicine in reality. So whatever is not cosmetic is government run. So yeah, I've always had that opportunity to do a little bit of both. But yes, my academic appointment and my still exists, and I've gone through the ranks a little bit over time. But I had a little combination of both since the beginning, more academic and at the start, and then switching over with as I get older and a little bit more gray.
So, all right. So how much of your practice is private versus government?
At this stage in my life, probably 80% is private and 20% is government right now.
Oh, very
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
And do you like that balance?
I like it very much. I think I'll probably end up going to 90-10 in the next couple of years, and we'll see how that goes after that. But government practice, unfortunately, even though there's a lot of rewarding stuff in what I do there, as usual, bureaucracy gets in the way and it makes things a little bit less pleasurable.
I get those calls quite regularly saying, I don't think I can take the hospital setting any longer. I can't do anything here. My hands are tied. I feel so just thwarted, So, but it's really tough. I can imagine to jump from a peace of mind of having that salary and having that hospital backing to going out on your own. What kind of mindset did you have when you were saying to yourself, like, how long did it take you to say, I've got to have more than just this academia?
It took me a few years, I'll tell you that much. It took me a few years, and I did it slowly, right? I did it slowly. I started building up my private practice little by little. I ended up, growing that part of the practice a little bit more. Trying to get a second space, a second office that I could work at and not combine it with the hospital practice too much. And so it was a transition period in the mindset part is a transition period that probably took anywhere from 5 to 10 years to do that, right? And until then I was kind of able to take a full jump. I think a lot of it has to do with that financial stability and other commitments, right? I mean, I didn't want to do a whole lot while I had big financial commitments in terms of education of my kids, mortgages, things like that. I didn't want to sort of suddenly find myself, not being able to pay that. So that I think plays a big thing in the mindset as to how you do things.
For sure. And eventually you have to decide and jump, you have to make the best of it. There's that saying, nothing happens until you decide. And then I don't know, there's some kind of saying for that.
Something like that,
So
yeah.
here's the most interesting part that I know the audience will appreciate. When I met you, you were speaking at some meeting, and I was introduced to you by another surgeon we both know well. And he said, oh, meet Dr. Gantous. He just joined my practice or bought my practice. I can't remember now, but give me that, because that's another huge one. It's another transitional time in your career where you say to yourself, okay, I have private practice, but what is this it or what's next? And you happen to transition
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
That's exactly, and that's what really that was the big leap for me. I had rented space and used the space in what is this office now from the other surgeon that we both know, who's a very well respected academic and private medicine surgeon in Toronto, one of the fathers of facial plastic surgery in this country. I rented space from him. This was where I was developing that private practice. It was what worked the best for me. And he basically informed me, gave me a timeline for his retirement. He was going to close shop, right? And he was putting his practice for sale, and he asked me whether I would be interested. So I obviously was interested, although I was a little bit reluctant, and economically and financially I was trying to sort of figure out was this going to be a good thing or not. Make a long story short, I mean, we met, we agreed on terms. I got the financing that I needed, and I just jumped on board, right? So that was really the best decision I've made in most of my professional career in terms of how things turned out. But it could have gone either way, right? But I had the confidence that it was going to work well, and it was just the way we did this that made the huge difference.
So how long had you been in that practice before this happened?
I had been in this situation, working in this office. We weren't working together. We're not associates or anything like that. I just rented space. I paid him for space, for secretarial work, and so on. I had my own practice coming here, right? And the days that he was in the OR, I could be here because he wasn't using the office. And I probably had been doing that for about 10 years.
Oh, okay.
So
years. The big question is, how do you value this practice? What are you buying? Because that becomes a very big question when it comes time for money to change hands. Exactly. What were you buying?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because medical practices, as opposed to the United States and Canada, are never sold, right? Because they're government practices. You don't need to sell anything. You can hang up your shingle and you're going to be busy in 2 seconds, with government covered things. Whereas cosmetic practices that are private are not often put up for sale. Sometimes they're just closed. It's a market that hasn't been, it really hasn't been tapped into too much, right? Most of the surgeons that I know have just retired. Some have tried to sell at exorbitant prices and nobody bites. So what happened in this case is that the value of the practice was based on not the surgical practice, because to me, buying a surgery practice doesn't make much sense, because how do you ensure that people are going to come and have surgery with you, right? That knew the other surgeon, and most of those people had already had their operations, so it doesn't make much sense. So this surgeon had a very, very big filler and neurotoxin practice. So it generated quite a lot of money a year in terms of that. It was a big practice with that. He did all his injectables himself, had a nurse that helped him with that. So that is something that we agreed that had value, right? Because we thought that probably a good 80% of that patient population would come and have their injectables done, because that's something a little bit easier to have confidence in somebody else. So that was how we valued that practice and how we made the purchase, with certain agreements, of course, of how that was going to happen, which are very important.
Did you take over the lease? Did you buy a building? Did you buy the furniture? Did you buy the patient list?
Yeah. So basically, what we did is I took over the lease of the office space. I made we made a commitment that he was going to stay on for at least 6 months, still working, and he did. He had stopped his surgical practice. So the agreement in general was I was going to take over the lease, the salaries of the employees, whoever I wanted to retain. And I retained all the employees except for the esthetician who had decided to retire as well. So I didn't replace her until very recently. And basically what we did was that he stayed on, and he paid me rent, right? And he paid me for the consumables and stuff like that, and he paid me. So we switched, complete opposite as to the arrangement that we had, exactly the same, right? So he gave me a small percentage of what he was billing to cover for, secretarial and rent, but on top of that, the agreement was that during that 6 months, he was going to introduce me to the patients that he was injecting.
Right.
So I would take,
Right.
yeah. And that was the key element, right? So the days that, at least once a week or 2 half days a week, I would come over and I would meet, and he would introduce me to his patients as he was, I got to meet them. I got to see how he injected them, how he did things, a little bit different than how I did things. And, but I got to know the people. With that came the goodwill part. And the goodwill part was the surgery. So he had a busy surgical practice. I didn't buy his surgical practice, but there were patients that are still coming and calling the office. So, in that first 6 months, I operated on probably 50 patients that were not patients of mine, but they were patients of his that were coming back, and he said, "No, Dr. Gantous has taken over. I'm not doing any surgery." And there you go. So that was an incredible asset to me, right? Because that is something that I was able to monetize very easily, to transfer that amount of goodwill into something that was concrete. And in the meantime, getting to know his long-term patients that were coming, on a fairly regular basis for injections. And these are the type of patients that do keep on coming back. We had estimated about 80% retention, and I think it was more like 95% retention.
Wow.
I think we've had, over the 3 years since I took over, I think we've had 2 or 3 patients that have requested their charts to go elsewhere.
No kidding. Good for you.
It's been fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. That goodwill piece is not talked about enough and not focused on enough, but it's transference of credibility. His patients have to know that you are the next best thing to him. So I highly recommend, during that transitional period, I would even get it in writing that you'll do videos together, you'll do Instagram together, he'll introduce you in creative ways to just constantly pass from him to you, because you really need those patients to stay put. Did you like his kind of patients, or did you want a different demographic? Was there any?
I actually like his patient. I mean, he had the perfect patient population, right? He had patients, well-established Torontonians with a lot of old money, elites of every sort, right? So it's the type of patient population that he built a lifetime building, being a native Torontonian, being from the right circles. He built this practice over a lifetime, and so I was very lucky to be able to keep that type of practice, right? I mean, I like my own practice that I had, which has blended it and folded in very nicely. I had a little bit of a different demographic, and I had, and I still have patients from, a little bit more multicultural in certain sense. But the patient population that I inherit from him was great. They're very loyal customers. They come back. Once they like you, you can't do anything wrong. So and they have the means to purchase the services at a level that I wasn't used to.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you get from that. You can up level your mindset and your demographics. When you hang around with somebody else who had done that, he showed you the way and you took it. So good for you. Yeah. Did the staff, let me talk about the staff for a second, because you say that you retain the staff, which can be fantastic. but it can also be a train wreck when they start saying, that's not how we used to do it. That's not how we do it. Was there any of that, or was that transition
Not at
good?
all. It was great. It was great because he had put his staff on contract for the last couple of years, right? Just he had done everything. He had announced his retirement, planned it, so he did it all legally the way it was. And then basically, when I had a talk with all of them beforehand, and I asked them whether they were willing to stay, right? And at that point, the esthetician sort of said, "Well, I think I'm going to retire as well," and that was fine, right? So I didn't replace her immediately because I wanted to have a little bit more comfort that this was going to happen, that it was going to work the way I wanted it to work, right? So I had a good chat with all of them. And I knew them because I worked here, right? So it's not like I was an unknown person coming in. They knew me, and they knew I did things a little bit different. So it was no problem. We did new contracts on them. And it was very funny because our assistant, the office assistant, and the receptionist, she's a feisty little Italian Argentinian woman, and very young, very very pretty, and this one switched allegiances like this. Like this. The moment I paid her first paycheck, that was it. Do I have to do that for him? She would ask me. I go, yeah, you worked for him for many years. You're still going to do that. I go, so it was great. And our nurse, I've also known for a long, long time, and she was great. She nicest person in the world, right? So it worked out very well. I had no issues with staff, no issues with bringing in new ways of doing things, and I changed things, right? I brought my EMR into the practice, which he didn't have, right? We started switching things, doing little things like that, and so it worked very well. And then I brought a little bit more technology into the practice that was missing. So other than that, our styles are not that different in terms of how we treat patients, how we do things, how we treat people. There's not a whole lot of difference in that. I like to think we're both pretty nice guys. So,
right, I think you are. So when you look back at that whole period of transition, is there anything you would have done differently or recommend others do if they're thinking about doing something like that?
Not really. I mean, it worked. It was so smooth and it worked so well that I had no issues with that, right? I don't think I would have done anything different. It worked the way I expected to work. The money that I paid for the practice I made in the first year, right?
Nice.
Yeah, so it was not there was nothing that could have gone any better than what it did. I don't have any regrets whatsoever, and I don't think I would have changed anything. If I did again, I would have done the same thing, right? The same thing. I just wanted to change. I just wanted it to change the physical space a little bit. I wanted to tune it up a little bit, and I really, I probably would have done that a little bit sooner, but I let the doctor stay in his office here for a little bit longer than I probably would have, because he was having some issues at home in terms of their youngest daughter having some issues with renovations of her house, and they had full house, couldn't move all the stuff out at the time. So it went a little bit longer than expected, but I did not want to sorry about that. I did not want to start doing any renovations while he was still here. But
did you have to close up shop while you renovated, or did you practice during the renovation?
I did close, and it took me a while to do it, and then COVID hit. I was going to do it a little bit earlier, and then I just wasn't able to. It took me a while to get the right contractor. Then we had the design done and so on, and so that it's a process. It took about a year longer than I wanted to do stuff, and then I closed for 3 weeks only. We gutted the place, but my contractor was very good, so I closed for 3 weeks. I took a little space next door that was a dentist had that they let me put some of my stuff, and I saw patients 1 week, and then I just kind of closed the rest of the time. I think I was going on a trip someplace as well anyway, so it didn't make much difference. But yeah, you don't. It's impossible to do a renovation of this magnitude without closing shop, so, or moving someplace else, right? So
For sure. So let's talk about marketing. Is your practice, is it in a competitive, is Toronto as competitive as New York, Miami, Chicago?
well, I mean, it's hard for me to say, right? I mean, it is a competitive market, right? We have the same competitiveness that Americans do in terms of facial plastic surgery, dermatology, now a little bit more, oral maxillofacial surgeons and so on, plus all the the family doctors and non-medical personnel offering cosmetic services, and injectables and fillers and so on. But from a surgical point of view, it is a competitive market. There's no question about it. People shop around, they go, they see multiple surgeons and so on. So we are in that type of market as well. It's it's the biggest city in Canada and the most populous city in Canada. So we would be probably more the size of a Chicago, right? But probably more. I think we can compare more to Chicago than any other city. Weather-wise and population-wise and so on, without the crime.
Well, that's easy compared to Chicago. I'm actually from Chicago, and I'm glad I'm from there, not there.
Beautiful city. I love Chicago. Beautiful.
It used to be terrific, and the news makes it look like it all burnt down, but it used to be a lot of fun there. I liked it a lot. But,
yeah, no, exactly.
I mean, I didn't like it enough for the weather.
Yeah, there you exactly.
Yeah. So when I was researching you to do this podcast, it looks like you like to differentiate yourself with revision rhinos, and most doctors run for the hills with primary rhinos, let alone revision. That is a tough group. So why would you do that, and how's it going?
Oh, it goes very well. I mean, the reason I've done it, the reason I did that is one. I mean, obviously, I'm confident in my abilities, right? But I understand the reason why doctors don't want to do it, because of my academic background and the fact that I've done a lot of reconstructive nasal work, and I still do. That's one of the few things that I still do. Very, very, very tough cases with granulomatosis, with cocainosis, accidents, cancer, stuff like that. I feel comfortable doing that type of difficult case. And then it happens that at the end of the day, if there's not enough people that are doing revisions in your community, somebody has to do them. So it is something that comes my way. A lot of my colleagues that are well established just don't do them. Some don't even revise their own noses. So it just, somebody has to do it, in my opinion. And it's challenging. It can be very gratifying. It can also be, you pull your hairs and you wish you never had touched that patient. That's the problem, right? But you have to have a little bit of a thick skin, and you have to know how to manage people. And that's one of the issues. That's one of the reasons I was slightly late today. Is I had a patient for a revision nose that wouldn't leave the office. We tried everything.
Yeah. How many revisions will you do on one nose? I mean, if they call you and say, I've got 3 or 4 already, and now I need Dr. Gantous to take care of it, where's your country? So
I think what it comes down to really is what, not so much the number, although the number is important, right, because of the tissues, but I don't focus so much on the number of revisions they've had before as to what the tissues look like and what the patient feels they want, and whether I think I can help them, right, with the necessary tools. So, there are noses where you just know you can't do anything for them, or they may have had only 1 operation or 2 operations, and what they want is unachievable, right? So those are the ones that I will stay away. Whereas I've had patients that have had 7 or 8 procedures on their nose, right? But what they want is reasonable, right? And there is a chance that we can achieve it, right? And to be honest, I haven't regretted operating on those patients. They may not turn out excellent or, even very nice looking, but just changing a few of the things that bother them makes them feel like, they have a new lease on life. And, maybe it's just breathing a little bit better. Maybe it's just correcting one feature that was bothering them tremendously. And that's the thing. Now, when you have somebody that I have revised and then they want a little touch up for something that I don't think I can get, I'm not going to do it, right? I will just tell them that's enough. That's all I can do. So it is a problem for us, right? The number of operations that they had. But like yesterday, I operated on a patient that I revised a few years ago, and she had already 4 operations. And I revised my revision yesterday, right? Because what happened was that she had a mild infection and one of my grafts didn't survive as well as I want. And she had the effects of that. Nothing bad, but she shortened a little bit more and rotated a little bit more than she and I wanted. So I just revised her, and she did very well, but she was very reasonable as to what she wanted. So her tissues were in pretty good condition regardless. So, I knew that we could help her. So I know I can do something that is going to help them, and we're on the same page, right, as to what the results are going to be. I will consider doing it.
Well, your reviews are great. So you seem to be having an issue with that, but those patients can be tough when it comes to online reputation. They're the first ones to get on there and, set up websites, telling how awful you are. So, and you haven't had that. So congratulations. You're doing a good job
I
there.
haven't had a website against me, but I have had a lot of bad reviews.
Oh,
we
they're
hide
hiding
a little bit, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
not too many, but you always have a patient that. And to be honest, I've never had a bad review from a cosmetic patient. I've only, the people, some of the few bad reviews that I've had have been from cancer patients or reconstructive patients that are usually very grateful patients. But now and then you get one that just doesn't get it, right? And but that's I've been a little bit lucky in terms of that compared to some of my colleagues in town.
Yeah. Well, maybe you're selecting the right patients too.
Possibly, yeah.
Let me ask you about the non-surgical rhino that has taken over on social media for sure, and the younger people. How is that fitting into your practice?
It doesn't really fit into my practice very much. I mean, I do very few primary, like non-surgical rhinoplasties. I have a few oriental patients that I find that they're reasonable, and they're they seem to understand the risks, and what they want is reasonable. So I've done it. A few girls with big humps that are waiting to have surgery, and I know their families, or their families are patients of mine, so I've done it. But it's not something that I advertise. The reason is that you see too many problems. There are complications. There are issues with that. And doesn't mean that I don't use fillers in the nose. I do use fillers, particularly on revision noses, right? Sometimes there's mild imperfections that we can fix perfectly with that. And they can be my revision noses and my patients, and I will offer them little fillers to help camouflage some stuff. And I think in those circumstances, it's a very good choice. As a primary thing, some people do a great job with it. They make the nose look great. I'd rather do surgery.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what about the aging face rejuvenation? On your website, you're showing it, but it feels like you're still very much into the rhinoplasty world. Do you do both?
I do. No, I do. I do a lot of rejuvenation surgery. I like it. I like rhinoplasty the best. It's the most challenging operation. It's a real thinking man's operation. It never gets boring. They're all different. Rejuvenation surgery is great. It pays well. It's patients are usually very happy. They don't give you any grief like rhinoplasty patients, right? So it's great. I find it a little bit boring at times, right? They can be tedious, longer operations, right? And not a whole lot of creativity into it, but I do it. I mean, I do. We have obviously an aging population in Toronto. The patient population that I inherited in this practice is patients that have. I've done a lot of revision facelifts on patients that were done by the surgeon that I brought the practice from 25 years ago, right? And they've come for their second or third facelift. So that's great. I don't mind doing that. And we do quite a bit. We do a lot of eyes and things like that. So brows and necks and, segmentoplasty. So it's quite a lot of that. I am well known for the rhinoplasty, and that's why it's a big focus in my practice. And it's also something that distinguishes me a little bit from a lot of my competitors.
Well, and that's the secret to marketing. You externally market to be the specialist in something, and then you internally hang on to them for all sorts of other things. But getting well known for one procedure is the way to go in any time.
Exactly.
What about on your website? You've got the 3D imaging, and I love your the way you have it set up. So you have 3D imaging. You're encouraging the patient to upload their photos, and then reserve a virtual consult with you. And you also charge $175 for that consult. Do you charge $175 for the virtual and the live consult?
Yeah, it's the same price. It's the same
Yeah,
price that I do. I mean, I prefer to do a live in-person consultation, right? And we got better during COVID at doing virtual consultations, right? We all had to learn. So people still ask about it, even though things are coming back to normal. People still ask about it, but I do get patients from all around Canada, so that's why we do a lot more virtual stuff. With the 3D, it's part into the system that I have. They have the 3D virtual consultation and so on, so you can do it. It works pretty well. It's fairly seamless. So we do offer it, or we just do it in the office when people are here. Then will just do the 3D or 2D in some cases imaging, depending on what time constraints and what people want, right? So all technology has a limit, right? So 3D imaging is great when it works well, but it doesn't always work great. So sometimes we'll elect to do a 2D imaging, and on my iPad, I'm pretty quick about doing that, and it works. Sometimes it looks better than the 3D images as far as I'm concerned, but whatever the patient wants, right? That I'm fairly flexible with that.
But from a marketing perspective, in today's world, when you're throwing yourself out into the universe and trying to get sales leads from that, it's just such a bag of tricks. Like who knows what you're going to end up with. So I love that you have put up gates. So it's on your website, it's very obvious that you love art. You don't use models, and I love that as well. Use artwork instead. And then you let that prospective patient upload their photos, schedule the consult. They're going to pay the $175. That already you have set yourself up for so much more success than had you just said, click here for a free consult. And now you've got everybody and their brother. So you can have 100 leads coming in, and maybe if you're lucky, one of them converted. Whereas in your case, I guarantee you're converting a lot of those, or way more than you would having not put up those fences for them to.
True. Yeah. No, that's very true. We do have a fairly high conversion rate, which is nice. And I mean, I'm happy with that website, and I mean, I find it to be a good reflection of who I am and how I do things, and so that's it works well, and every little thing like that, as you say, it helps create a persona, create an online persona, create an image of what you're offering, and so on. At least you hope it does, right?
Well, it's different. What else do you do to market yourself, or do you not have to anymore? You're not resting on your laurels, I hope, because the world is changing very quickly. I notice you're not big on social media. What are you doing to keep this boat afloat?
I don't do a whole lot of social media. I mean, I have my Instagram account. I have a personal one. I have a practice one. I'm not a big poster, right? I will post things when I think are important and so on. Part of it is just being busy and not having somebody doing it for me. And you're always kind of mulling, should you have somebody else do it, right? Most of the marketing comes through the website and, my, webmaster, and they tend to do a little bit of stuff on Facebook and different media. And, we have newsletters that come out, right? Those attract a lot of patients, right? We promote different treatments every month and introduce staff and new procedures or whatever we may be doing. So that seems to work quite nicely, and it's just fairly non-intrusive. We don't do too much. We don't send, once a month. That's it, right? We let people sign in or sign out of that, and we respect that. So we're very non-intrusive. We try to keep things as classy as possible without, over-barraging people with information and unwanted emails or ads or things like that. So that's mostly what I do, right? I don't put too much money into it, right? So.
Mm-hmm. But there's such a challenge there because others are putting the money into it. Others are marketing themselves with no shame, So you always have to think about that.
Absolutely, I'm always thinking about it. I think, at this stage in my career and so on, and I have a reputation. I have, not just with patients, but also with colleagues across disciplines, and that helps, right? And also sort of being still involved with the university and being head of the division of facial plastic surgery, that carries, a lot of panache in some people's minds and in patients and other doctors and so on. So I do get a lot of requests because of that. So I'm lucky in that way. I mean, things have progressed in a good way. And sometimes I look at some of my colleagues who spend a fortune in advertising. Maybe they have a few more patients, that's for sure. Maybe they have, but I don't know. At the end of the day, I look at what you're taking home, right? And how you live your life, right? And if you have 20 staff versus 3 or 4 staff, and if you're spending X amount of dollars a month versus a smaller X amount of dollars a month in something, it's going to affect your, the bottom line, right? So advertising more and having more patients doesn't mean that you're actually more successful, right? So I'm very happy with how things are. I can only do so much as well, right? I can only do so much operating. I can only see so many patients, right? So I'm happy where things are, right? We not sure, you always want to be a little bit busier. Maybe you want to have a little bit more than this, but I sometimes just when I find myself thinking too much about that, I sit myself back and I just kind of think of what I have, what I do, and whether I really want to do something very different, and that kind of calms me down a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I think you just have to know yourself. I've watched surgeons building the castle, and they've got the 30 plus staff, and the overhead is killing them. Or they're really good at it and they have built, a really smooth operation. Not many have, though. You have to know yourself because so certain surgeons have said to me, I was so much happier when I just had my wife, my nurse, and my receptionist, So, I mean, they wanted their life back. So there's no one way to do this. And that's the good part. You can set it up any way you want,
Yeah. I'm a surgeon. I'm not a businessman. So, I have to trust my instincts to do things that I think will work for me, and that's it. So.
Well, and it's working for you. So if you're happy, that's the most important thing.
Exactly.
Is there anything in particular you study, or like, I love talking about mindset, like what keeps you motivated or keeps you adaptable to change? Is there anything you read or watch or learn from?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Catherine, I mean, I travel a lot to conferences, right? I'm, invited to speak in many conferences and courses, around the world. I have very good friends and colleagues from all over the world, and because I speak several languages, I get invited to different places as well. It comes with the territory and your background, right? So So that is always, to me, one of the things that keeps me up to date with things, right? Listening to my colleagues, right? Chatting with them over a glass of wine or a beer, or more often a cigar and a scotch, chatting and learning what they're doing, how they're doing things a little bit different. Going to visit colleagues at times. I mean, I haven't, even though I've been around a long time, I have a big practice. I still like to go see some of my colleagues operate or do things a little bit different. I get on the phone if I see somebody doing something I don't know how to do very well, they'll send me a video, right, of how they do a procedure, right? So I want to learn how to do stuff like that. And then we're always, even rhinoplasty, which I consider myself an expert at. I'm still changing. I'm still learning new things. I'm still trying new things because, it's a lifelong study, right? So I do that. Obviously, I read the journals. I belong to some WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups in interspecialty and within their own specialty and of aesthetic practice that some of my colleagues have been fantastic about putting together. And kudos to them, right? They kept us all involved and created a group of people, like-minded people, to present things, to discuss things, to ask advice. And that has been very, very great. And that all happened during COVID, right? Where we all had a little bit more time when we're shut down. And so that keeps my interest professionally, right? I have many interests outside of medicine, right? That keep me happy, and those are just as important as just your medical and scientific endeavors.
For sure. I know you are you paint, draw, you're into martial arts, you're fluent in Spanish, Italian, and French. Dear Lord. Yeah. What do you do in your free time? That's a lot.
Well, that's some of the stuff. That's some of the stuff that I do. The martial arts, boxing, all that stuff has been pretty much on hold for the last year. They're just this week they were reopening my boxing gym, so I haven't really done it in over 12 months or more. So I like to exercise. I mean, I like to try to stay in shape. I do like art, painting, and drawing, and I. We had a chat briefly about this before we started, and I wish I had a little bit more time, and I'm forcing myself to do it. I read a lot. I read a lot non-medical stuff. I'm always been a big reader, and so that always is something that happens. And I like spending time with friends. I like socializing. I like having my kids when they're around come over, and I like to cook. So I do like to entertain at home. So, and I like to go out and eat at restaurants and all that stuff. So it's nothing out of this world, but those are things that keep me going. And I like to travel. I like to travel for work, and I like to travel for leisure. Those are the things that are important to me.
What's one of your favorite meals to cook?
Oof. That's a hard one to say, right? I mean, there's lots of stuff that I do, and I think it probably changes. It probably changes, with time. But based on my background, there's several things that I like to cook. One of my grandmothers was Italian and a fabulous cook, right? And I learned how to make gnocchi from her. So I like to make pasta, and I'll make my own pasta, and I'll make stuffed pasta, and I'll make gnocchi, which is really truly not a pasta but a dumpling. But I still remember her with both hands rolling gnocchis, and like a speed that I can't, even as a surgeon, I can't manage to do stuff the way she did. And then on my dad's side, the Lebanese side, there's lots of stuff in that Middle Eastern type of food that I like to do. I mean, I go, one of the things that I've been cooking, that I've been trying to perfect a little bit is, I make a pretty good seafood paella, which I like very much.
Nice.
That's a good one to share with people, so.
Yeah. Oh, wow. All right. I'm available for dinner
There
anytime.
you go. Exactly.
I love
Have you over. Don't worry.
Yeah, I have never learned how to cook myself, but I sure like it. I like to eat it. I just
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Thank you. So just to wrap this up, do you have any words of wisdom, especially for the younger guy coming up or the one who's dying to transition, who's dying to jump? Any words of wisdom for them?
Yeah, I mean, for the latter, for the one who's dying to jump and transition, I mean, my advice is if it's something that you really want to do, just do it. It'll work out, right? It'll work out. Just do it. Just make sure that your finances, your financial arrangements are doable. Even if things don't work out, that it's not going to put you in the poorhouse, right? I don't think one has to go big. I don't think you have to build a $20 million surgery center, right? You just need to take the plunge and change how you do things. So just my advice on that is just do it, be smart about it, do your homework, and then you bite the bullet and you do it. I don't think anybody's going to regret it, right? Once for that. For the younger surgeon, for the the fellow transition, my advice, and I tell this to my residents, I tell this to my fellows, right? So, find what you like to do, find something that makes you happy and do it, and try to become good at it, right? Keep an open mind. Don't get stuck in how you learn something in residency. That's the only way you're going to do it. Always learn how to do new things, right? Always learn how to do new procedures, even though nobody taught you how to do it. I think if you have that frame of mind, you're going to succeed in a surgical career. If you're doing something you love to do, you're going to be happy doing it, right? Whether you make a lot of money or not that much money. No, in our field, nobody's going to go hungry, right? If you do things for the right reasons and you make patients happy and you take care of people, because that's what we're in the business of. We are in the business of taking care of people. So always remember that you're taking care of people. Whether you're doing a cosmetic rhinoplasty or you're taking a thyroid out or you're putting tubes in the ear in a kid, right? You're taking care of people. You're trying to make people better, right? So I think that's the important thing. Just remember what brought you to do what you're doing, right? I doubt very much that there was money for any of us, right? That comes afterwards, right? It comes with success, and there's time to do it. It's a long career.
Wow. And with that, we are going to conclude now. If you did want to learn more about Dr. Gantous, you can check out his website. It's torontofacialplastic.com. Is that correct?
That's correct, Catherine.
Facialplastic.com. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you being on Beauty and the Biz, Dr. Gantous.
It's been absolutely my pleasure, Catherine.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, that's a wrap for us. So please, if you feel so inclined, head over to subscribe to Beauty and the Biz at iTunes and leave me a review if you want. You can also give me some feedback or questions, anything you have. You can leave me a message on my website at catherinemaley.com, or you can DM me on Instagram at Catherine Maley MBA. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again soon.